All right. First of all, thank you all for coming this morning. My name is Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller, and I want to thank all the community leaders from across the city who are here today. Roland Lewis, President and CEO of the Waterfront Alliance, and we have community leaders from the Rockaways and the South Bronx and Coney Island and Lower Manhattan. And we're here today because we're going to release a brand new analysis on the lagging storm recovery efforts and the vulnerable communities that are exposed to future storms. Over 6 years ago, Superstorm Sandy slammed our city. 17% of New York City's landmass was flooded, costing New York $14 billion in damages. Homes were lost, businesses were washed away, lives were turned upside down. It was a 1 in 260-year storm, and it caused unprecedented devastation across the 5 boroughs. But here's what should alarm us all today. Rising sea levels and changing weather patterns means that storms like Sandy won't be so unprecedented in the years ahead. We're already seeing these changes right now. Houston, Texas experienced 3 500-year floods within a 3-year stretch. Scientists now estimate that Sandy-like flooding could be a 1 in 5-year event by mid-century. This is an emergency. There is urgency. So we're here today to sound the alarm. We're calling for a comprehensive citywide approach today to protect all 520 miles of the city's shoreline from the storms of tomorrow. Because any politician who talks about 20, 30, or 50-year plans to tackle this crisis isn't matching the urgency of the moment. Time is running out. After Superstorm Sandy, New York City received $14.7 billion to spend on recovery and future resiliency, $14.7 billion. 6 years later, New York City's only spent 54% of that money, half the money that was allocated 6 years ago. We've managed to spend only 20% of the FEMA dollars earmarked to repair our local hospitals. We've only spent 14% of the $473 million in federal funds for coastal resiliency projects. This next detail is something I find unbelievable. Of the $3 billion allotted for NYCHA, $3 billion, only 41% has been spent, leaving public housing residents dangerously exposed. All the talk of a monitor, all the NYCHA investigations, from lead to boilers, there's a pot of money, $3 billion, and NYCHA and City Hall could only allocate 41%. This is the tragedy of this moment. I was in those NYCHA developments right here in Lower Manhattan. There were no lights. There was no way to get to the seniors on the top floor. We literally had to call in the National Guard to deliver food and medicine. 41% of the NYCHA dollars has been spent. Now, I've been around government for a while, and I understand that projects take time to bring to fruition. We recognize that this is difficult work, absolutely. And we know that we need to change the federal government red tape that only makes it harder to get these projects done fast. 100 million pages of documents, or millions of pages of documents, has to be submitted to the federal government, and we need to do a better job organizing to change that policy. But I'm here today with the community leaders because we're in this line of work to do what is hard, especially when it's right, which means that across the board, our current approach is too slow. We have begun to accept that projects cannot or will not move. Now, make no mistake, we have a moral obligation to act quickly, and meaningful action is an economic imperative. So, as controller, I run the numbers in this town, and our office ran the numbers and found that a staggering $101 billion in property value is located in the most flood vulnerable areas of our city. It's $100 billion. Homes, hospitals, schools, businesses, families' entire life savings are all on the line to the tune of $100 billion. 6 years since Sandy, we haven't done enough. We're not fast enough to safeguard these communities from the next big superstorm. So I'm here to say we cannot kick the can down the road. It's time for a true resiliency plan with an ambitious vision that beats the timetable imposed on us not by government deadlines, not even imposed by the advocates, but by climate change itself. Lives are at stake, and the horizon is not 20 or 30 years. There's no such thing as a 2050 resiliency plan, folks. It doesn't exist. We will not be here for it. A resiliency plan must be year to year, and it must cap within 8 years. That is what the science is showing us. So I'm calling today for a comprehensive citywide plan. We can't piecemeal this. We can't just do Lower Manhattan and not think about the entire coastline. People suffered in all of our boroughs. We need to explore creative ideas that would guarantee more dedicated funding streams for resiliency projects. I'm talking about that surcharge on insurance policies that we could bond out, that could realize a lot of money. And we need to learn the lessons from Build It Back and the audit I did 6 years ago or 5 years ago, which says that we have to reorganize OEM and prepare for what will come, not in 500 years, but perhaps in 5 years. And we cannot rely on the consultant mentality. Have a storm or a tragedy and then hire consultants not qualified to do the work in the first place. We need to be updated on how we are building up our own resiliency OEM in city government. We also need to devote real resources and energy so that we have optional neighborhood-based buyout programs for areas of our city that aren't just vulnerable to superstorms, but they're actually getting flooded now on a monthly basis. Go to a rain, follow the rain in some of our boroughs and see just what is happening. We've got to give people the opportunity to have that buyout issue dealt with in a financial way. I hope we can give hope to the people who have dedicated their lives to this city. Homes were washed away. Let's not forget what happened. We also need to remind ourselves that businesses still continue to struggle. Seniors who built up our city, this was their life savings, and their lives, their photos, their family trees were washed away. Our next generation, my children, your children, all the children we're never going to meet, they deserve to grow up in a livable planet, but they also are New York kids. And I want every New York kid to be able to stay here and not feel they have to move because we washed away so much of this city in the next few decades. So today we release this report. I call on the mayor and stakeholders to create a new citywide resiliency plan. I want to call it the urgency of now, with metrics every year, not every 10 years. Metrics every 2 years, not every 20 years. These are the issues that we have to deal with. And now I'd like to call on